The anxiety of when you first retire. So much stress, wondering if you're really ready, fear about whether your money is going to last. But what if I told you that the answer to dealing with these things doesn't cost a thing? Today, I'll share the mindfulness practices that are really helping me as I enter retirement. And I'll bet that at least one or two of these you never even heard about before or even tried before. There's four main places that I have found mindfulness to be really helpful in retirement. When I'm dealing with anxiety, helping me start my days really well, getting more in tune with my aging body, and then also strengthening my relationships. Mindfulness, it's really simply being fully present and aware of what you're currently experiencing. Let's go ahead and start with a couple ways that I like to handle the uncertainties and the anxiety that can happen when you're retired. And there's no shortage of uncertainty right now. We've got the worry of what's going to happen with the Iran war and the economic implications of that, rising prices, the list just goes on. And when you're retired, the threat of inflation or an economic downturn, it can be really scary if you don't have a huge nest egg, which I don't. I do find myself feeling anxious more often than I'd like to with respect to the uncertainties that we're facing right now, particularly because I realize that these first few years of retirement, your finances, they're really critical to how your whole rest of your retirement is going to be. And even though we have a couple plan Bs for big economic downturns and high inflation, and that makes me feel a little better, but that stress still pops up from day to day. And there's sometimes where you just can't seem to push it away. And I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling like this. So there's a couple really great mindfulness exercises that I like to use when I'm feeling this way. And this first one is particularly effective. I call it mindful accounting. I find it works best if you go outside and take a walk to do this, but you can do it indoors as well if you can't get outside. You start by simply noticing something in your surroundings and then letting your eyes just linger on it for a few moments by tracing around the shape of whatever it is. You'll count that as one object. So that's one. And then you notice something else. Let's say like it's a leaf and you let your eyes linger on that. You kind of trace around its outer shape for a moment or two. And then you count that as two. So as you're walking, you just keep counting things. It could be something like this big tree, and you go all the way up and around the perimeter of the tree. Or it could be something as simple as a stick on the ground or a clump of grass. And you're not really noticing anything in particular about what you're counting, like the color of it or how pretty it is or anything like that. You're just using these things as a method to have something to count mindfully, which is why letting your eyes move around the perimeter of whatever it is that you're looking at works really well. In a way, this is somewhat similar to meditation, as in meditation, you usually are focusing your attention on something like your breath, and then you are bringing your attention back anytime it wanders off. But I find focusing on counting things a much more entertaining method of training my brain to practice focusing. You just want to keep it slow and gentle and a relaxed pace, and you keep going until you get to at least 100. And at that point, there's a pretty good bet that you'll be able to notice that you're feeling more calm and grounded. Another way I like to practice mindfulness while walking is to focus on my senses one at a time. I like to start by listening to sounds. So first I'll usually focus on sounds that are near to me, maybe like the sound of my feet hitting the ground. And then after a while, I'll shift to sounds that are further away, like maybe a plane flying in the distance, or maybe traffic in the background, something like that. And then I try to notice sounds that I might not have otherwise noticed, such as a few weeks ago when I was noticing the difference between the sound of a car's tires hitting the pavement versus what they sounded like when they were going through slushy snow. And then after losing interest in sounds, then you can shift your attention to what you can see and basically do the same thing. Notice things that are up close, and then notice things that are further away from you. You can try noticing small things and then large things like a big tree or the clouds. Then you try and notice things that you normally wouldn't notice at all. And then when you're ready, you can shift to smell and even touch if you want. I probably skip taste for a walk, but hopefully by this point, you will have already noticed yourself feeling a bit calmer. So speaking of feeling calm, I find that when I start my day feeling calm, happy, and grounded, it just has a huge impact on how the rest of my day goes. So I do use mindfulness here too to help me have a really calm start each morning. Now that I'm retired, I love that I can start my days slowly. I'll usually wake up, and for a few moments before I even get out of bed, maybe I take a couple of really deep breaths. I might stretch, I might notice how the light is coming through the window. And then as I start getting going doing things, I try to just be really mindful of appreciating all the little things that I enjoy. So things like my favorite mug handle that fits in my hand just right, and the warmth coming off of it while I'm sipping my bone broth. And sometimes while I do this, I like to go outside and I'll just sit on the front steps and get that bright morning light to help set my circadian rhythm. And that's when I'll take a few big deep breaths of that fresh morning air, sit and look at things and notice things like the birds singing, the sun coming up. These moments, they really do matter. They really facilitate setting your day towards a trend to be positive. And after you're retired, you don't have to hurry off to work anymore. So you may as well do what you can to start your day off feeling really good, at least mentally. Then on the physical side, a friend shared with me once that as you get older, something always hurts. It just shifts from one place in the body to another, day to day or week to week. And as I age, I'm beginning to find some truth in that. So I think you have to be able to discern what's really a problem. And that's where being in tune with your body and what your body's telling you can be very helpful. Yoga is a great way to practice this. I actually stopped teaching yoga a few years ago, but I still love making it a part of my routine. I found that it's helped me learn to use that same level of body awareness in other physical activities as well. For instance, when I'm lifting weights, I'm a lot better now about being more conscious of ensuring that I'm targeting the right muscles are contracting. And things like when I'm eating, I'm a whole lot better about paying attention to how full my body feels and then stopping before I get completely full. That little tip alone has just made a huge world of difference for me in reducing bloating and digestive issues that I never had until after I turned 50. Unfortunately, as we age, digestion just becomes less efficient. And it's amazing how something as simple as being mindful and paying attention to stop eating before you get full can be. So we've talked about using mindfulness for handling uncertainty, for how you start your day well, and for being more in tune with your body. The last thing that I wanted to share is how it's also helped me deepen my connections with the people that I care about. When you retire and work is no longer the focus of your days, I think you really begin to recognize that it's the people in your life that are most important. And I'm sad to say that I spent years being a pretty pathetic listener. This happens all too easily when you're really busy, like I was before I retired. I was always just too busy thinking about what I needed to do next. And hurried communications, it got to be a really bad habit for me. I had to be really intentional so that I started slowing down enough to really focus on the person while they're talking and to really hear them. Mindful listening. And I found that when you do this, it's really magical what happens. You really connect, and it feels so good to both people. I'm sure there's been studies on this, but it's got to be incredibly healing. You can find other resources such as free downloadables, my seasonal living journals, my lifestyle redesign for retired women course, all on my website at www.jmbliving.com. And JMB stands for Joyful, Mindful, Balanced Living. This video is actually the third in my series about smart living for retirement. So if you enjoyed this one, you may also want to check out the one that I did last week where I talk about how seasonal living can really bring the spark back into your days and how I go about living seasonally. Thanks so much for watching.